Oh, yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. Think we're back online, inshallah. Alhamdulillah, salatu salam rasulullah. Thanks, guys, for making it. Alhamdulillah, it's the last session. Really excited, really looking forward to it. I'm just going to do a quick recap of what we did last week. So, alhamdulillah, we talked about the history of how Quran has been preserved orally, and also from a written side of things, we're talking about how the text itself morphed to accommodate different styles of recitation, but also different people and their different linguistic backgrounds. And what I have in front of me here, mashallah, is it took us about 200 years and the coming of Khalil ibn Ahmad al-Farahidi to introduce these sets of harakat that we have in front of us. And as you can see from left to right, it explains them in details. These are the accent marks. They're called, they just define the different levels or pitch of each vowel. We've got the fatha, which is the open one, like ah, oo, e. Obviously, we've got the sukoon, which is a silent one. This is not a silent letter. This is just a silent sound. Silent letters we're going to discuss later, inshallah. But the sukoon, as we said, that's a circle around thing. It comes in different forms. We've got the shadda, which is the stress and the emphasis sound, like ab. That's a rundown. Now, there's a science behind it. Let's go to the next page, inshallah. So now we're going to talk about, when you look at these things here specifically, you notice that when you recite the Quran, you've got these ahkam that are color-coded. So when you recite them, فمن يعمل مثقال ذرة خيرا يره or شيء وكيل وخير من. Now notice here we're talking about the stuff that's colored in the red. That's talking about the letters of Idgham specifically. Idgham talks about merging. Now again, subhanAllah, not only has the ahkam tajweed is not only is it an oral tradition that gets passed down and you have to get certified by means of ijazah to say it correctly, the text that is drawn in front of you right now that I present before you, it takes into account the traditional Arabic script, the rules of grammar, but also is artistically hand-drawn to accommodate for the ahkam tajweed. So when you think about it, we didn't have any of these things, the dots and the harakat or the vowel sounds or the drawings. Then they came into place. They were dots and they got transformed from dots into the form that we have here in contemporary Arabic and Manuscript. And then after that, what happened is that we decided to put in innovation. Innovation here, I do not specifically mean bid'ah. Sometimes you hear people saying, they're getting taught, and I'm saying this, I'm being brutally honest. Do say this directly, aim to the brothers and sisters that claim they're pushing forward you could say, the agenda of Quran and Sunnah being extremely strict. Some of them claim to be so strict to the point they actually start rejecting things that are actually part of the faith. When I talk about an innovation here, I'm not talking about making up an ijtihad. I'm not talking about deviating from the way of Sahaba. The main thing about isnad, whether it's be it in hadith or Quran, is you have to stick to the text that's before you. And the sanad, as mashallah has been said, the sanad is part of the deen. The only problem that happens, and I've seen this happen a lot, even when it comes to people that claim to be muhaddithin, not muhaddithin, they claim to be muhaddithin and following the way of the salaf, the first three generations, where they do not have a qualification in ijazah, and they start talking to somebody with an ijazah qualification about not making a bid'ah. This creates more fitna than actual harm, because at the end of the day, they don't know what they're talking about. Well, the only thing that we are trying to do is we are following in the way of the Salaf, in the way of the Sahaba and the previous generations, as you can see in front of me here, sometimes by color coding, sometimes by drawing things in a certain way so they make it easier for us to facilitate the recitation of the Quran. That is what we call I'm not calling it a good bid'ah, but you could say an ijtihad or an opinion that is formed without changing anything with the meaning or the script or the isnad. Because at the end of the day, we treat the Quran the way it's obviously written, the way it's recited. Exactly, it has to follow exactly the way of the Sahaba, not even I'm talking a third of a haraka more or less. So I hope I made that clear. When I talk about an innovation in that regard, it's not a bid'ah. It's basically just like how the Sahaba did it under their supervision, under the supervision of all of the Sahaba. Just like how that happened at their time where a mistake happens in writing a mushaf, they decided to burn the masahif for quality control. Just like how, mashallah, Abu Aswad al-Du'ali, on the permission of Sayyidina Ali, who was the Khalifa, the head of the Islamic State at that time, who said, put dots or come up with something to make it easier to pronounce. That is the acceptable version. What we have today before us is, as you hear people talk about tarannum and maqamat, when they transgress, and I do mean this with all the meaning, where they start introducing things that you can't find in the text or the sound. And you'd be like, you go, على شيء وكيل. They'll be like, على شيء وكيل. Musical things that aren't accommodated, these things we can't account for. So that's, just to make things clear. When I'm talking about introducing something that actually improves the recitation and actually makes us stick to the script more, that makes sense. I'm not talking about anything too crazy. Anyways, I do apologize about this. I've definitely digressed. This is basically a rant. But if somebody ever comes up to you and asks you about the proof or not making a bid'ah, or let's just say it could be the fact you're not reciting correctly, this is why ijazah has its weight. You can stand your ground and say, this is my isnad, give me your dalil. And that's basically it. Anyways, going back to here. So you can see the drawings, we have the harakat. Sometimes, if I'm correct, brother Asa, is it referred to as double zabr, if I'm correct, from the Indo-South Asian community?
Yes.
Perfect, yes. So different places call them different things, but they mean the same thing. What you can see here is we draw them specifically to accommodate for the ahkam. So if you go to the next page, you've probably seen this in your mushaf. Sorry, if you can flick to the next slide, sure. I'll probably give him an example about. Yes. So here, as you can see, we call this tanween bid-dhamma, or tanween. That's how it's called in Arabic. It means giving double harakah of each, like an, un, in. And I've given you the different types. I'm using here the dhamma, the closed vowel sound, and the double fatha and the double kasra as an example. Fatha and kasra, as you know, double fatha with tanween, double kasra with tanween is above or below the letter. But notice that they're drawn differently. This is where the science part comes in again. And mashallah, this is the new layer that we put forward because we wanted to help people not actually pronounce the letter correctly now. We're talking about helping them pronounce tajweed correctly, to say it in its most correct form. Because it's not just enough to say an yaqulu. Yes, you're speaking like an Arab right now, but you have to speak wahi, as it was revealed to Rasulullah. So you're saying ay yaqulu. So here, specifically, we've got two different types. Now, people that have been in my tajweed classes and Sheikh Amirs, they know for a fact there's letters that you merge. You've got yarmaloon. If this letter comes after a nun sakin or tanween, you do a specific hukum. Otherwise, it has to be high. You have to say it clearly. What we can see here is if you look at the harakat that I've shown you before in the previous slide compared to this one, the type of tanween that is drawn from a calligraphy perspective dictates if it's got a hukum after it or not, or the type of hukum. So technically speaking, if you're smart and you can actually read calligraphy in its finest, by just looking at the word, not only will you pronounce it correctly, but now you have an idea about the hukum that's going to be happening, or the tajweed ruling that you have to get ready for in the next word. This could be ikhfa. Sometimes, in ikhfa, or you got ikhfa shafawi, there'll be a meme, there's a sukoon. We talked the sukoon as a round part. Sometimes we'll take that out intentionally. You look at that word, and you go, not only can you say the word correctly, but go, oh, this is going to have to make ikhfa on the next one. Same thing with the tanween. If it's got two sharp kasra and they're identical, or fatha, double dhamma, on top of each other, parallel, then you just say it as izhar. Abdan min ibadina. You don't go abdan min ibadina. Oh, astaghfirullah azim. I'll give you a better example. Muhammad. Shay'an an, for example. Or let's just say shay'i wakil. Let's bring this back. Shay'i wakil, it's got the double fatha on top, but you can see they're sliding. They're not 100% copy and paste parallel to each other. It's not like mirror image. Same thing with dhamma. If you've got double dhamma, obviously you make tanween. But as you can see how it's drawn in the center figure, if you see that, you go, hang on, the next hukum is al. I hope that's kind of summarized it now, really briefly. So any questions about the tanween and how it actually helps people, facilitates them to say tajweed correctly? You guys understand what I mean about, drawing things differently and bid'ah or not when it comes to reciting Quran?
Yep.
Perfect, alhamdulillah. So when you think about it, yes, these things have been put in the Quran. Has your recitation changed? Not really. Maybe it became a bit better. Has your fiqh changed? The fiqh opinion is still the same. You're going to do things in, isti'adha as appropriate. Has your aqidah changed? Not necessarily. You haven't switched between, and I'm saying this directly to the people that talk to me outside of this group. You haven't switched from aqidah tahawiyya, from a so-called Athari creed, as the name calling goes around, or Ash'ari creed, or Maturidi creed, just by actually the way that you do the harakat. Has that changed? Of course not. If you are pronouncing correctly as revealed by Rasul, and you're doing a change that is in line with Quran and Sunnah, that's perfect. But as you can see, this doesn't harm your aqidah, it doesn't harm your fiqh, it doesn't harm anything. And this is in line with what the Sahaba did. We'll go to the next page. So let's talk about today. We've talked a lot about the past. Alhamdulillah, as you can see, not only have the first generations, mashallah, done the most contribution when they've done with regards to putting in Quranic script, the techniques they've had, because the science was studied and they planned in advance, mashallah, was so well. It means somebody like me or any other brother that even when I read Arabic text today and I go back 1,000 years, I can still understand it because, mashallah, of what they've contributed. And as you can see today, as a result, we've got different masahif, mashallah. We've got the Tajweed Mus'haf in Damascus. This has been introduced as of 1994. This is probably the famous color-coded Tajweed Mus'haf that you see in front of you. It makes it easier for people to pronounce the rulings of Tajweed. It takes basic things to the next letter because it combines the correct Arabic and the Ahkam al-Tajweed. This is built off the Mus'haf produced by the King Fahd Press in 1985. MashaAllah, if I'm correct from memory, it's currently being headed by Sheikh Ali al-Hudayfi. And he brought a lot of, mashallah, well, internationally renowned scholars. They kind of combined, you could say, what you call the Green Mus'haf, or the Saudi King Fahd copy that's there in the printing press. The Syrian version uses exactly the same text, but it's just decided color-coded. Some of them are really nice, mashallah. They're actually in the hamish on the side, as you can see there. They give you meanings of the words. Meanings with the words, and I say this is for the Arabs. And this is a critical thing, because at the end of the day, most Arabs don't even understand what they're reciting. So again, this is the Arabic Mus'haf, written in the Eastern style. Now we're talking back 200 Hijri, which is the Eastern calligraphy style. It's based off that, and it has meanings for Arab people. Which is, if somebody comes up to me and says, look, I don't want to study Arabic, well, I mean, this is a Mus'haf in front of me. He's a typical example. Mashallah, we've got the newer ones now. You've got the Maqdisi style Mus'hafs. Produced in Malaysia, 2015. These probably the newest copies that I know of to date. Mashallah, they're built on the Syrian copy. But they've got the added benefit of putting the actual meaning of the words at the bottom, which is, mashallah, it opens up huge doors to people that don't come from an Arabic background. So I really encourage this. If you want to understand the meaning of the words and you're starting to learn Arabic and Tajweed at the same time, especially if you're in Islamic University, take up the Maqdisi Mus'haf. And as you can see, mashallah, it started off with the Arabs, but subhanAllah, at the end of the day, after 200 Hijri, well, not even before that, we got biggest contribution we did was 50 years after Hijra. Then you got Khalil ibn Ahmad. You mashallah have Sibawayh, the grammarians. These people came from non-Arab backgrounds. You got Ibn Ajurum, who actually introduced the rules of Arabic grammar. They actually help us with the foundations of understanding where the harakat go. He's an ethnic Berber. Mashallah, you've got, as you know, the Indo-Pak Mus'hafs. They've got their own way, mashallah, of drawing it, mashallah, over in South Asia. And that's where the majority of the Muslims are, population-wise. They made their own contribution to the art of Quranic script to help non-Arabs better recite Quran. And mashallah, I've competed with some of these guys. I'm talking, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh. Mashallah, they produce high-class international reciters. When I say that, I mean they do not make any hifz mistakes whatsoever, and they read better than the Arabs. I'm dead serious. And that's the role of the Masahif. And as you can see, I hope I've covered this as much as I can. It started off with the Arabs, and mashallah, finished off now by us being the minority. Just to tell everybody that, look, we are one ummah, and this is a community collective. Anybody can do this. Yes, I went overseas for 3 international competitions. Alhamdulillah, I presented New Zealand in 3 nationals. I could have not done this behind the backing of Indian Sheikh, inshallah. And likewise, I'm telling you, you guys are lined up to be in the same position as I was, inshallah. So alhamdulillah, without any further ado, I'll probably try to close off this section. Any questions about the script so far? I do apologize, I'm running short on time. That's why I'm going really quickly. But any questions about the Quranic script before we finalize, the details? Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair. All good, brother. So we'll probably go to the next pages. I think this might be it for this section. So we'll go to the next one. These are all the references. Some people, I think you guys already been sent the details. So if you need anything with regards to academic references or university style research, this is the stuff that I personally used for this. And feel free to read it up in your own time. Inshallah, we'll go to the next sections. Oh, good, alhamdulillah. So now into part 2. I'll have to finish off the remaining parts of the book. We'll just cover up any other final details. I'm going to talk about the minor things now in the book. We'll just go to the next page, bro.
I just stop the recording and start again so that I can have the separate recordings for both, if you don't mind.
Oh, I mean, in that case, what I'll do, you're right if I finish off the last 6 pages for that section?
Yes, you want me to go back?
Oh, no, just keep it as is, inshallah. So, inshallah, this is basically the last of that in the book. I'll be reading from page 243, inshallah, an illustrated tajweed guide by Dr. Ayman Swed. This is still part of it, inshallah. So, alamat suqut al-alif, the symbol for dropping the alif when continuing and keeping it when stopping. So the modern scholars of vowelization have continually put a rectangular 0. So here we talked about the sukoon earlier at the beginning of this lecture, above the alif, which is produced when stopping and dropped when continuing. This is, talk about Hamzat al-Wasl specifically. When it comes before a letter with a haraka. So the example the Sheikh here uses, ana khayrun min. So, and you got ana. The example here we're talking in the case of the mentioned alif comes before a second letter, is left without vowelization, it is dropped but due to combining, according to this rule, in order to get rid of meeting of the 2 second. So here it's talking about the ruling. We talked about it earlier in the book. قاعدة التقاء الساكنين. You can't have 2 sukoons ever be present together. So what we tend to do is there's different sets of rules, but basically we try to kind of, let's say if there's 2 sukoons ever meet together, we try to intentionally break a vowel sound to actually get the word moving. Just like how you start a car in condition to get the car started. Same thing when it comes to reading Arabic. So you say, ana nadir. He shows you how it looks like, how it sounds like, but how you actually recite it and the role of the circular sukoon. Because we said there's different types of sukoon. There's the soft sukoon, which is the standard silent vowel. And there's the really sharp one. You don't go ana, you say ana. Anyways, we've covered this in detail on the previous sections. And we're talking about the small letters that are extra in the script. So here we've got extra things. Mashallah, we talked about the primary things that are important to the script, like the dots. We've talked about the harakat, which is obviously secondary. And now we're talking about the fine details that aren't really, I'm not saying they're relevant, they're still very relevant, but they help put the final touches to your pronunciation. And I'm going to cover them quickly. Scholars of vowelization add small letters to replace the letters omitted from the written words, which was the custom of the Arabs in writing during the era of prophethood, in order to indicate the necessity of pronouncing them. So that's why these things were put in. It's like you still have to pronounce it. It's not a silent letter. So I'm making it clear to you. Accordingly, they put a dagger like alif. Here it's for, sometimes you might hear it as Hamz alif khanjariya. It's like a short little one. You can look at this in the book to replace the omitted one. So example of this, anybody can open up a mushaf if you don't have the book. Look at Surah Al-Fatiha. You got Maliki Yawmiddin. Now, Maliki, it has been specifically put in there if you have the green style mushaf that is built on the Hafs and Asim recitation. But the reason why we put it in there is obviously if you completely don't have a background in Hafs recitation or Quran recitation or anything, you might read it accidentally as Maliki, which is still valid, but it's a different qira'ah. So here it's like it gives you a hint, like Maliki. You got Al-Kitab. You don't say Al-Kitaba. You say Al-Kitabu. You say Al-Kitabu. It just extends it slightly. You probably heard this as mad tabi'i or naturally elongated mad. Sometimes your teacher might have said that in tajweed. Same thing, wallahi. So these are simple examples. I'll go on to the next page.
But interestingly, in Urdu, we call it the standing zabar, the khadi zabar, standing fatha. Yeah.
Jazakallah khair, bro. Like, mashallah, it's like, this is basically it. If you heard it as a different name, it's still the same thing, mashallah. Jazakallah khair, bro. So all these things are practical. They just are little guides in there to help us read it. If you're an advanced person in your language, whether it's Urdu or Arabic, you might not even need it, especially if you have a typewriter. But mashallah, this is there just to kind of complete it, to make it look visually appealing as well as sound correct. Sometimes you might see a little noon. I've seen this in, the South Asian style masahif as well. They're also in the Arabic ones. The small letters that are extra in the script. They put in they put in a small noon to replace the omitted noon. And here, the examples in the Quran, you might say this in كَذَلِكَ نُنْجِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. You got فَنُنْجِي مَنْ نَشَاء. And you got تَأْمَنُونَ. Now here, the Sheikh is talking about the qira'ah of Nafi'. I'm not going to talk about the difference between تَأْمَنُونَ and with a slight ikhtilas, and ta'manna as we do it with Ishmam. He was specifically relating to Hafs and Asim. We're going to skip this. But if you see that little noon, you know what's there for. It's to help you execute proper pronunciation. Number 3, they put a small waw to replace the omitted waw. And you probably see this example, I can think of it as Dawood. Every time you see Dawood, you see the letter waw and you see a small waw just to kind of push it through. Ma wuriya. You don't say ma wuriya. Same thing. The pushback ya. It looks like a ya, but it's a flat ya. I know it's written again slightly differently with the South Asian Musahif, but different people call it different things. You say, you got a best example you probably grew up with is the ilafi Quraysh ilafihim. You don't say ilafihim. You got fama atani Allah. You don't say fama atani. So that's what the little extended ya for. They also put the above mentioned waw and ya to indicate necessity of linking the mad. So this is really technical. I'm not going to talk about the science behind this. You'll probably see this in different qira'at, but you got Bismillah ar-Rahman. So it happens sometimes when I do it with people when they recite the correct way of saying it. Innahu ala raj'ihi laqadir. You don't say it as innahu ala raj'i or raj'ihi, yaj'ihi. So here the extended ya or the extended waw is kind of like letting you, it's a letter that needs hams. Like the hat, for example, sorry. The hat, فحثه مهموسها أجد استغفر الله العظيم فحثه شخص سكت. So these are the letters of hams. These are put in there to tell you, look, release a little bit of air with that letter. Let it flow out a bit more. That's the purpose of it. Next page. Vowelization of letters which is not read as it is written. That's an interesting one. We've covered this in detail. I'm not going to talk about the detail of it, but basically it's a difference between you got the dag alif. Now let me break them down. You got the Daga Alif, you got As-Salah Bushrakum. That's one use of the letters which vowelization of letters which is not read as it is written. So you don't say salawat, it's a salata, and you kind of leave the waw there. Bushrakum. You don't say bushrakum. Best case example I can think about is the letters are there but not to be said. It depends on your tariqah. We've covered this in detail earlier, whether you're starting in Shatibiya, tariqah Shatibiya from Hafs, or you're doing it from Taybat al-Nashr. And you can hear it, Wallahu yaqbidu wa yaba sutu, Wallahu yaqbidu wa yaba sutu. There's a letter on the top and the bottom to kind of indicate that this letter can be said in different ways. So now we're not only are we accommodating the Arabic pronunciation or the tashweed, this is going to the specific tariqah as well. So it's talking about the different dialects. Mashallah, you can see the different layers. So these are additional letters. You can choose to use them according to your style of recitation. This is for highly educated qaris, and you'll be tested on this in Ijaz level. Yes, we've talked about this, the simple of sukoon and idhar. So vowelization scholars have conventionally put the upper part of the letter kha without a dot, as in the symbol. Previously mentioned, please refer to page 240 to indicate the letters, the second letter, and its idhar. So you've got man aman. So as we said, the sukoon, if there's a hukum, sometimes the noon second, the sukoon will drop. That's the biggest hint, as we said, when it comes to looking at the script from a scientific perspective. But here, the sukoon is kind of telling people, look, you have to make a dhar. Same thing, we talked about this at the beginning of class, and they agreed that making the two harakat right above each other, like the double fatha, double dhamma, double kasra, indicates that making idhar of the tanween. An example of this, as we said, is alimun hakim. You don't say alimun hakim. You say adaban alim. You don't say adaban alim. And the type of double fatha, if they're directly on top of each other, and this, like in this case, adaban alim, you say idhar. If they're sliding on top of each other, obviously, there's a different hukum. Next page. The symbol for complete idgham. Oh, yes. This has been covered before. Vowelization scholars also conventionally made a symbol for the complete idgham, which is to remove the sukoon from the merged letter, along with the stressing of the next letter, as in, you hear this as well. You got yudrikum. You don't say yudrikukum. You got asaw wa kanu. Irkam ma'ana. Wa qur rabbi. I don't say qul rabbi. This is completely merges into it. And as you can see with these letters in the book, they don't have the sukoon. It's a hint for you to do that. As-sama alam nakhluqkum. Here, the examples, we got examples of idgham between words, like kam ma'ana, and we got nakhluqkum, yudrikkum. So just showing you it can happen between words and within the word, if the letters are very similar to each other in characteristics or identical. ما لهم من مال من لدنه من ربك. If a tanween is what is being merged, they made the succession of the two harakat and the symbol of complete idgham. This is in the way, again, it shows you the symbols in the book. We've already showed them in the slideshow, along with stressing the second letter. شيء نكر خير من خير لكم غفور رحيم. So we're just covering more examples rather than the three that we just talked about earlier. Okay. علامة الإدغام الناقص والإخفاء. Yeah, go ahead, bro.
A short question. With the alam nakhluqkum, so we won't give hint of the qaf there. We'll just skip that one and straight away go to the kaf.
Yes. Yeah, pretty much. So same thing with yudrikkum. So here, the kaf, you don't say yudrikukum. The example of the kaf, it's the idgham. We talked about mutamathalain and mutaqaribain, the close to articulation points. Oh, sorry. The letters can either have identical articulation points or close enough articulation points. So what we tend to do is, like, you know, the example, it's a classical example of English, you don't hear going to, you see here gonna, for example. So the same thing happens in Arabic. But what we tend to do from a script perspective is we highlight this by intentionally leaving the harakat out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got
Inshallah.
it.
That's all right. Okay. Scholars, oh yeah. علامة الإدغام الناقص والإخفاء. Visualization scholars also agreed to make a symbol for the incomplete idgham and ikhfa, which is removing the sukoon from the first letter without stressing the next one. As in, من ولي أحط من قبل ترميهم بحجارة. Oh, sorry, we covered this already. I'll give two more examples. سنة ولا نوم خيريرة شيء قدير. Another example. علامة قلب النون here for iqlab, same thing as well. Visualization scholars made a symbol for changing the noon, sakina, and it's a small meme above the noon instead of the sukoon. Now we got mim ba'd, amburik, ambihum. So you see it as a small noon with a tail at the bottom. It's on top of, sorry, it's a small meme with the tail at the bottom, it's top of the noon, just to indicate a club. You see this with tanween as well. As an example of sami'un basir, jaza'un bima shay'in basir. And they made the symbol for changing tanween, putting a small meme instead of a second haraka, which indicates a tanween like this. So that's what we mentioned. Simple of imala kubra, ishmam. I'll cover this real briefly. We've covered this before. We talked about majreha. You don't say majraha. If you see a small diamond or a dot around the letter, you say majreha. So making the imala of the fatha of the letter ra, as in the alif that follows Surah Hud. This is a one-off case. This is because visualization scholars conventionally put a big circular solid dot as indicative of the rules. Same thing for ishmam. Ishmam, ta'manna, you might see a diamond, a hollow diamond, or you might see a red dot. That's Surah Yusuf A11. Some contemporary visualization scholars gave the shape of a hollow diamond. Yeah, so that's what we discussed earlier. And we have the one-off example we talked about, tasheel, a'jami. You don't say a'jami, you say a'jami. You make tasheel of the next letter. We talked about this in the last lecture. Same thing with al-dhakirin, Allah, and al-an. Alhamdulillah. So, I'm not going to get into the details here. Pages 249 and pages 50, you can read in your own time. Basically here, they talk about the difference between the Quranic script and the modern script and dictation. As far as I'm concerned, this starts talking about silent letters, compares modern script. I'm not really interested in that as part of my syllabus, but you're more than happy to look at examples in your own time. So that's basically that section. Jazakumullah khair for your patience. I've been going through it quickly, just to make life a bit easy. I'll read one page about the memorization side of things, and we'll start the next lecture. Oh, actually, we'll leave it there, inshallah, and we'll start the next video. We'll talk about memorization, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.